Okay, let me know if this sounds familiar to you. You're introducing your students to new vocabulary words, maybe something that's connected to a story that you're reading. You introduce the words, your students look up the definitions, they write a few sentences throughout the week. On Friday, you give them their vocabulary quizzes, and most of your students ace the quiz. However, a few weeks later, that same word that they just got tested on makes their way into another passage or some other text that they're reading, and your students have no idea what that word means. It's like everything you taught them just went out the window. Now, we know that vocabulary is absolutely crucial to comprehension, but how do we get our students to engage with vocabulary words in a way that actually makes them stick? Hey there, I'm Sarah Marie, creator of the Stellar Literacy Collective and host of the Stellar Teacher Podcast. And today I'm going to be sharing with you 4 really simple and effective vocabulary engagement strategies that you can use with any word that will really help your students engage with vocabulary in a way that will actually make it stick. Now, before we get into those strategies, let's talk a little bit about how we usually have our students engage with vocabulary and why that doesn't always work. So after we introduce a new vocabulary word, we often ask students to practice that word by using it in a sentence. Now, that sounds like a great idea, right? But the problem with that is we just introduced this new vocabulary word to our students. They have very little exposure to it and very limited use with this word. So it's a little bit fuzzy in their brains. So they maybe heard the word and they heard the definition, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel confident in understanding the part of speech or the function of the word or correct scenarios when to use that word. So before we have our students use a word on their own in a sentence, we want to give them opportunities to engage with this word that are going to help them build their confidence and really deepen their understanding with this word. And that's exactly what these 4 strategies are going to do. Now, before we get into those strategies, anytime you're introducing a word, you want to make sure that you are explicitly teaching vocabulary to your students. And we've talked about this before, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, you want to introduce the new vocabulary word to your students using a student-friendly definition. You want to show a picture to your students that relates to the word so students can really connect it to something that they know. You want to give them a list of synonyms so that way they can connect it to words that they're already familiar with. And you want to show them that word in context so that way they can really understand how that word is used. Now, once you've done all of those things, you're ready to have some fun with your students and really get them to engage and practice using that word in authentic ways that will really help boost their confidence. So the first strategy is super simple. It's called repeat after me. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Your students are going to repeat whatever it is that you're saying. Now, repetition can be really helpful for students, but we don't just want them to repeat the word, although that's helpful because it helps them with their pronunciation of it. We want to have them repeat a sentence that is using that word in context. So a super simple way to do this is that you would go ahead and say a sentence with the word, something like, listen to this sentence. It is crucial to wear a helmet when riding the bike. And then your students would repeat that same sentence. It is crucial to wear a helmet when riding the bike. And then maybe you could all say it together. It is crucial to wear a helmet when riding the bike. Now, by repeating the full sentence, students are going to immediately hear the sentence with the word used correctly, and they're going to get an opportunity to practice saying that sentence with the word used correctly. So immediately, right off the bat, they have one rep using this word in a sentence in a way that totally makes sense, and it's going to start to solidify their understanding of this word. Okay, the next strategy is one of my favorites, and it's called yes or no questions. And with this strategy, all you're doing is asking your students yes or no questions that really get them to think about the meaning of the word. And I love this strategy because it requires students to have an understanding of the word. So you're able to check in with, do they understand what the word means? But it's a low pressure way that doesn't have really high stakes, and you're able to quickly see, do students understand it by simply having them explain their answers. So once students get comfortable with the yes or no questions, you could maybe throw in an open-ended question that students still really have to think about the meaning of the word, but can maybe give a more elaborate response. So let's say the word that you're teaching is crucial. So you would ask your students a series of yes or no questions about that word. So for example, is drinking water crucial for staying healthy? Their answer should be yes. Is choosing what color t-shirt you want to wear crucial? No. Now, students might prefer it, but it's not crucial. Is brushing your teeth every day crucial for good oral hygiene? Hopefully the answer is yes. Is using a bookmark crucial for remembering where you are when you read? So this could be a good question because the answer is really no, it's not crucial, but you could talk about how it's helpful. So students can really sort of understand that crucial means essential, important, necessary, not necessarily just helpful. And so then once you've asked some yes or no questions, you can ask a follow-up question that's a little bit more open-ended. Something like, what is something that is crucial to being a good friend and why? So again, students really need to think through, okay, I understand that the word crucial means important, essential. What is something that is essential to being a good friend? And then they could answer the question. So this strategy is really great because again, students are getting many opportunities in a short time frame to really solidify their understanding of what this word means, but they don't have to come up with any sentences on their own. Okay, so the third strategy is where we are gonna have students start to use these words in sentences. So the third strategy is to give students sentence stems for their response. So ultimately, we do want students to feel comfortable and confident using these words on their own, but rather than just jumping in and having to come up with a really great, detailed, complex sentence that uses the word correctly, we're gonna give them some support. So you can give your students a sentence stem, and it's really important that the vocabulary word is included in the sentence stem, and students are just responding to it. So they still get to add in some of their own creativity, their own personal responses, but they don't need to think about how are we using this word within the sentence. So some examples include, one crucial thing to do before going on a trip is, and then they fill in the blank. The most crucial step in my morning routine is, and again, they fill in the blank. One crucial step to baking a cake is, they get to come up with the answer. When you're at the library, it is crucial to, and then they complete the sentence. So in all of these sentence stems, the word crucial is being used correctly. So they're using the correct part of speech. It's in the correct place within the sentence. They're just completing it by adding in their own personal response, their own personal thoughts or opinions on it. And this strategy is really great because students are starting to use the word in a sentence, but because we're giving them a sentence stem, we're setting them up to be successful. Okay, so the final strategy is to have your students turn and talk about the word using a prompt. So ultimately, like I said, we want students to feel confident using these words on their own. And turn and talk is a great way because it gives students an opportunity not only to think about the word and use it and talk about it from their own experiences, but they get to listen to a classmate using that word as well. So you're going to simply have your students partner up and give them a prompt to discuss this word. So a prompt might be, again, if we're talking about the word crucial, an example would be, tell your partner about a time you had to do something crucial. So that could be a variety of things. Students can think about it and then they get to tell their partner about something that they had to do that was crucial, important, essential. And this is really great because it encourages students to use the word. So they're getting opportunities to use the word with very little support, but it is still a little bit focused. And the reason why this can be a great thing to do before we have students write using the word is that talking about the word and creating sentences orally is a lot less cognitively demanding than if we just asked our students to come up with a sentence using the word. So turn and talk with a prompt is another great way to get students to engage with the word in a much more, open-ended, authentic way, but they have some support that is going to make it easy for them to be successful. Today we talked about 4 really easy vocabulary strategies that are going to make it easy for your students to engage with these vocabulary words, which we know are going to make them much more likely to actually stick and be something that they remember and use long after you teach them. So the first one was repeat after me, where you simply have your students repeat a sentence that uses your new vocabulary word. The second one was asking yes or no questions, where you're going to ask your students a yes or no question with that word. The third one was giving your students sentence stems that include the word. So you're going to give them a sentence stem that includes the word, and then they're just going to finish it with their own thoughts or opinions. And then the last one is turn and talk with a prompt. So students do get to have a more authentic conversation around that word with a little bit of support. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments, which of these vocabulary strategies do you think you're going to try with your students first? Now, if you found this video helpful, please like it. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, be sure to tune back in for our next video, which will be out next week. Until then, happy teaching.